Okay, hi there class. My name is Ryan Conrad and I will be giving a confined space training for safety in the workplace. First off, I want to hand out this pamphlets or this information sheet that I made. It's a confined space training. It gives you some facts and figures. It gives you the goals and the objectives of the training. Some of the facts and figures for confined space incidences that 85% of the time supervisors were present. 29% of the dead were actually the supervisors. 31% had written confined space entry procedures, but 0% used the written procedures. 15% had confined space training. 0% had a rescue plan. So you can kind of look over these interesting little facts about confined spaces and why it's so important to pay attention to. Objectives of the training are to obtain a documented training of confined space, which is OSHA required for all of you to have, and that's what we're going to do here today with this confined space training. We want you to know that entrants and attendees need to work with a supervisor in completing a confined space permit. We also want to teach you the procedures for confined space entry and make sure that you're properly following those procedures. We need you to report any confined spaces that have not been labeled properly so that we as supervisors at Crown Court Conceal can properly label all of those confined spaces. We need you to be aware of all potential hazards dealing with confined space and what type of documentation you need before entering and upon completion of working with a confined space. And lastly, how to utilize and calibrate an air monitoring device, which we're going to do right here. So this air monitoring device, we're going to turn on by holding the button and it beeps at you. And this is a newer type of device that's going to calibrate all on its own. It takes 20 seconds, so we'll let that get going for a little bit. What is a confined space? Confined space has a restricted means for entry or exit, and it has a size and a shape that will allow an employee to enter or perform a task. I've been through many of these training sessions, and some trainers forget to add just how important confined space is because it is a major safety and health hazard. There are many incidences throughout the year that are recorded that could have been easily avoided, and they don't just lead to illness or injury, but in most cases they lead to death. Some examples of confined spaces are storage tanks, baking ovens, sewers, tunnels and trenches, maybe a trash dumpster. And our policies here at Crown are that all ovens are considered permit required confined spaces. Us as supervisors must evaluate the confined space to determine if they are permit required. If the space is permit required, we have to have a written entry program per OSHA standards. And if there's any contractors coming in to work at Crown, they must be notified of our OSHA entry program, our hazards, our precautionary procedures, and that we coordinate an operations meeting before entry so that we're all on the same page while the work is being done. Two types of confined spaces: non-permit and permit required. Non-permit is a confined space that does not contain an atmospheric hazard or a hazard of any kind, while a permit required confined space does. It has atmospheric hazards and a high potential of having a hazard to be present while the work is being done. Hazardous atmospheres expose workers to risk of death, impairment of rescue, injury, or illness. Flammable gases, vapors, or toxic substances exceeding their exposure limits are considered a hazardous atmosphere. It may expose workers to an immediate or delayed threat to their lives. It may cause irreversible health effects, and it definitely interferes with the worker's ability to escape a permit-required confined space unaided. Hazardous atmosphere, oxygen in a confined space must stay above 19.5. and between 23.5. Anything below 19.5 is going to lead to suffocation, and anything above 23.5 is going to possibly be explosive. Some toxic contaminants are CO, carbon monoxide, and H2S, which is hydrogen sulfide. All of these contaminants get monitored by the air monitor. So I'll show you how to use this now. It's all calibrated. Let's say you're in a confined space, you're the attendant, and you're holding this. This goes into the confined space, and it's sucking air through this tube and reading the atmospheric hazards and the toxins that are possibly in the space itself. So what it's reading, we have an atmospheric monitoring sheet here that the attendee must fill out. Every 10 minutes it is required that they do an air monitoring check, and they write down the readings that they're getting. We're looking for oxygen between 19.5 and 23.5. The flammable lower explosive limit is under 10%. Carbon monoxide is under 35, and the hydrogen sulfide is under 10. So all of these, the LEL, lower explosive limit, carbon monoxide, and hydrogen sulfide are reading 0 right now. We're in the safety of a meeting room here at work. You have nothing to worry about. But oxygen level, that is something that it is reading. And currently it's at a 21.2%. If you're inside a confined space and your oxygen level starts to drop, this is gonna not be able to suck as much air, and it's gonna start to accelerate, and an alarm's gonna go off. This means get out now. Your life is in danger, and the confined space has had an issue, and you need to get out because your life is in danger. It's going to regenerate and reset because it's sucking air now, and it reads that the oxygen levels are back to normal. Some confined space hazards are engulfment, electrocution, temperature extremes, becoming wedged or suffocated. There's physical dangers and high noise levels, potentially while working in a manufacturing setting. Before entering a confined space, there's things that you need to do before you go into a confined space. You need to fill out a permit entry form, and this is OSHA required. You have to be trained on all the potential hazards, and the hazards need to be controlled and eliminated. You have to finish this permit with the entrant, the attendee, and the supervisor, all who must be trained in confined space procedures. We need to certify as supervisors in writing that the space is safe for entry and that the requirements of this permit have been met. You always have to check the inner atmosphere with an air monitor before entering a confined space. You have to properly use lockout-tagout procedures, which here you can find in the supervisor's office where we have our coordinated meeting. You can look at what area or what machine you're going to be going into, what confined space. You can find the lockout-tagout procedure. A lot of our ovens that we use at Crown have gas in them, so you need to use the correct lockout device for shutting off the gas and follow the procedure and lock it out accordingly and properly. It'll show you each piece of lockout tagout that you need to use to properly lock out a machine so they can do their work in the confined space. You also have to provide continuous ventilation to the space to reduce potential hazards. When a person passes any part of his or her body into the opening of a confined space or a permit required confined space, any type of confined space, they are considered entered into a confined space. You always have to check the internal atmosphere, and our Crown standard is every 10 minutes is a safe standard for checking the air monitor device and recording what your readings are. If a hazardous atmosphere is detected and the alarm goes off, like I showed you with the low oxygen levels, the employee must exit the space as soon as they can. They cannot go back into the confined space until a re-evaluation and protective measures have been taken before sending the worker back into the confined space to continue their work. So the entry program that OSHA requires, it dictates that one attendant must be posted outside the space for the entire duration of the entry. It establishes a system for not only preparing the permit, but also to cancel one. And it includes the procedures for rescue if and when it is needed. Our rescue plan here at Crown is 911, and first responders and medical personnel are trained in confined space rescue. The OSHA standard is that everything we went over just now, we have to fill out our document, our permit. We have to have lockout tagout procedures. We have to provide air monitoring, determine the PPE necessary, and we must have it in writing that we will cancel a permit if any type of danger is present. The space to be entered, the purpose of entry. This is some stuff that is on the permit to get into the confined space. We look into the date and the length of the entry, the potential hazards of the space, the entry conditions, the air monitor test results, authorized entrance and attendance. You have to be trained, you have to be certified, what the lockout tagout is, rescue plans, 911, communication between the entrant and the attendee, and the supervisor, and any unauthorized people around need to be pushed away from the work area. Any special equipment that you might need, and additional permits, fire permits or anything like that is OSHA standard that is in our confined space permit training. So going into the confined space, you have your entrant that is going to be putting their body in the confined space to conduct the work. You have an attendee who's going to be monitoring the outside of the workspace and doing the air monitoring checks, and a supervisor who's going to be kind of the outside guard, monitoring everything, everybody around, keeping people away, making sure the attendee is attending to the entrant, making sure everything is going good. But they all have to be aware of what the hazards are. The entrant is the one who's putting his own life in danger, so of course he's going to want to know what types of things could be present inside this piece of machinery or this confined space that could harm his life, so he can be on the lookout for him. The entrant also has to properly use all the equipment, the PPE, a rescue harness, make sure that they're using the air monitor device, and they want to keep contact and communicate with the attendee to let them know that they're okay and that they're safe. And they also need to alert the attendee if a danger arises or something presents itself that is unsafe, because then they need to exit the space if any danger does arise. And then if they ever need to evacuate, a supervisor can cancel the permit. And if a supervisor ever asks them to evacuate, they must do it right away. As an attendant, you must also be aware of the hazards. You must know the effects of each hazard. Maintain communication at all times with the entrant. Be checking your air monitor device and monitor the people that are around the work area. If there's anybody that's unauthorized, you need to tell them, hey, this is a confined space, we're doing work inside here, you need to leave this area because you are unauthorized. And if a worker says, well, no, you have a supervisor right here as well who will definitely back you up. Pay attention. Don't be like this guy. See this guy on the phone? Don't be like this guy. We don't want to be like him. Get off your phone, pay attention, show some respect. As a supervisor, you must also be aware of all the hazards. These employees' lives are in your hands, so just pay attention, take it serious. You also have to verify that the confined space is safe for entry. while they're there doing their air monitoring test the whole way throughout the process. Be a good supervisor and be present to help them follow all the correct procedures. Make sure that rescue services are available. If a danger does arise, terminate the permit right away. You want to help the attendee keep all the unauthorized people away. And you just want to constantly monitor that the working conditions stay safe and are up to procedures once again. So in conclusion, we have a little test here to see how much you have learned. You want to pause the video and look at the questions. Okay, let's go through the test real quick. Number 1, emergency rescue teams must be available while authorized entrants are in a confined space. That is true. Number 2, a confined space always requires a permit to be entered. That is also true. Employers must warn employees of the existence and location of permit-required confined spaces via emails and word of mouth. This is false. Information can get lost being sent in emails. Word of mouth isn't a bad one, but we want to go the extra step. We want to have maps. We want to pinpoint exactly where all of our confined spaces are within our manufacturing area or within your work area, so your employees know where they are at all times and can stay safe while working around those areas. Number 4, employers must have a written program to cover permit-required confined space entry. That is true. Like I stated, it's an OSHA requirement that we have procedures set forth for our confined space entry program. Number 5, death often occurs during a rescue. Employees attempt to rescue an entrant without the proper training. That is true. So many times, if you don't have the proper training, an entrant could start suffocating and pass out in a confined space. Then the attendee is going in there to try to save him. He passes out, supervisor goes in, and it's just not a good situation. So that is true, unfortunately, that does happen. But that is why we're here conducting this training, so those types of things do not occur. And lastly, number 6, entry supervisors must verify all tests, including atmospheric testing, are conducted before entry into a permit-required confined space entry. That is true. You have to be there for everything. Like I said, a good supervisor is going to keep everybody safe and know what's going on at all times. Please take confined space entry serious. We cannot stress enough how much that working in these conditions can lead to major health effects. So please do not go into a confined space until you're 100% sure of every detail that goes into entering a confined space. As a supervisor, these people's lives are in your hands. As employees, as attendants, as entries, just take it serious, because split second something can go wrong, and you need to know how to react if a situation like that does happen. So I would like to thank you all for coming today, and you've been a great class to teach. I hope you enjoyed the presentation on confined spaces, and you all have a good day. This is Ryan Conrad for Safety in the Workplace.